The day I told them I was pregnant, my father, Jayden, didn't say another word. He just shouted in my face that I had brought shame upon the entire family. From this point on, whatever happens to you, you deal with it alone. This family has nothing to do with you anymore. My mother stood there, didn't stop him, didn't defend me, just gripped her rosary tightly as if I were a sin to be endured. I walked out of that house with nothing but a suitcase and a child that hadn't even taken form yet. 15 years later, they asked to visit me and my son. I saw the regret in their eyes. But some wounds can't be mended with a simple apology. This isn't just a story about forbidden love. It's about blood betrayal. And more than that, it's the journey of a woman, alone, pregnant, homeless, who still chose to rise and keep walking, step by step, until she was able to look her family in the eye once more. Where are you watching this from? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, so I can share the whole truth with you. My name is Amelia Jenkins, 32 years old. I grew up in Descanso, a small town where you could hear the church bells echo through the quiet pine woods. My family was the picture of morality and discipline, at least in the eyes of the community. My father, Jayden Jenkins, was an elder at Grace Church and also ran his own construction company bearing his name. He always wore a white shirt to prayer meetings, always spoke with measured words, and was admired as if he could do no wrong. My mother, Willow, was the epitome of a traditional woman, kept the house immaculate, cooked wonderfully, and never missed a single community event. She had won the apple pie contest 3 years in a row at the fall fair, and her backyard garden was once featured in the local magazine for being so perfect. I had a twin brother, Gabriel, but from the outside, no one would ever guess we were twins. Gabriel was the high school basketball star, a straight-A student, and was named most likely to succeed in the senior yearbook. My father called him the pride of the Jenkins family, and he never hesitated to say it in front of me. Since I was young, I had learned to step back, to listen rather than be heard, to work hard without the need for praise. My family looked perfect, a 4-bedroom house with a white picket fence, summer BBQs, and Sundays at church, but I always yearned for one seemingly small thing: to be looked at by my father with the pride he reserved for my brother. In my freshman year at the University of California, I took a part-time job at a small restaurant to help cover living expenses. And that's where I met Julian. He was the head chef, a quiet man with eyes that seemed to hold an entire story behind them. Julian was from Mexico, had lived in the US for 5 years, and had a unique way of guiding us at work. Gentle, meticulous, and always willing to listen. We bonded over conversations about French baguettes, traditional tamales, and our shared love of flavor and childhood memories. Julian didn't care for social media or phone games. He liked to draw and volunteer. One time I saw a sketch in his notebook of a mother cradling her child on a porch. I sat in silence for a long time in front of that image. Our love didn't come from flashy dates, but from simple moments. Cleaning the kitchen together, folding napkins side by side, and dreaming of a future with a tiny apartment and weekend road trips. Julian was taking an online restaurant management course, and I was holding on to my honors scholarship. By day, I studied, by night, I worked, and at the end of the day, we'd call each other to share every little story. But when I mentioned Julian to my family, my father's face darkened. He asked what kind of American Julian was. When I said he was from Mexico, my father simply said, "No." No further explanation. My mother was gentler, but still advised, "You should focus on your future." To them, Julian didn't have the right background, didn't fit the proper tradition our family upheld. I kept our love in silence, and Julian never asked me to choose between him and my family. He only said, "Let's take it slow. As long as you still want to be here." I kept studying, working, and loving in the shadows. Then one day, at the award ceremony for breakthrough marketing ideas at school, I won first prize. I hoped Julian would come so we could take a commemorative photo together, But I waited and waited. I called 3 times. No answer. I still thought maybe he was busy in the kitchen or a surprise VIP customer had shown up. And my parents? They messaged saying Gabriel had an important interview that day and they had to support him. I wasn't sad they weren't there. I was used to it. But a few minutes later, just as I was about to leave, a call from an unknown number came through. I hesitated, then answered on instinct. On the other end was a noisy, chaotic soundscape. Julian's voice broke through, not calm like usual, but full of desperation. "I've given 5 years to America. Why are you arresting me?" Then a police voice cut in, reading a deportation order. Time. Tonight. I stood, frozen. Julian shouted into the phone, "Amelia, I'm sorry." And then a long beep, slicing through the world I knew. I called back. Once, twice, 10 times, no answer. I don't remember how I left the school. All I know is my feet didn't take me home. Instead, I drove to the restaurant where Julian worked. On the way, I clung to a fragile hope that it was all a misunderstanding, that he would walk out from the kitchen with flour on his gloves, smiling and telling me he'd just forgotten his phone. But when I arrived, the restaurant was still lit, customers still seated, food still being served as if nothing had happened. I ran past the tables, scanned every face in a chef's uniform, but saw no sign of Julian. I went to the reception, nervously asked a familiar waitress, "Excuse me, where's Julian?" She paused for a second. The way she looked at me told me she knew who I was, knew what had happened, and knew I didn't know yet. She pulled me aside and said quietly, "Someone from ERO, Immigration Enforcement, came for him this afternoon. They read some order, then took him away." I felt like the ground beneath me had vanished. I asked, "Where did they take him?" "When?" She replied, "I only caught bits and pieces, something about a 9 p.m. flight back to Mexico. They didn't let him take anything with him. We were shocked too." I nodded, muttered thanks I could barely hear myself say. She looked apologetic. I left the restaurant disoriented, phone in hand, calling Julian again. Still no answer. That night, I sat on a stone bench outside a closed bookstore, watching buses pass silently. Each unanswered call felt like a dull blade, not enough to kill hope, but enough to make it ache endlessly. I checked the time. 5 to 9. Somewhere in some airport, Julian could be in handcuffs, forced to sign papers he didn't agree with, didn't understand, with no one there to protect him. And I, the woman he loved, couldn't even say goodbye. The next 2 weeks passed like a vacuum. I still went to school, still worked, still typed on my keyboard when needed, still smiled when I had to, but inside, it felt like I was living in a room with no windows. Every morning, I stared at my phone, as if just one message, one missed call, would let me know Julian was still somewhere in this world, still trying to reach out, still remembered me. I texted on Messenger, WhatsApp, sent emails, but nothing came back. A few times I got calls from unknown numbers and my heart would leap with hope, but they turned out to be from insurance hotlines or stock sales pitches. At night, I still worked at the restaurant. Watching the new head chef silently chop onions, I missed Julian so painfully it hurt. He used to wear headphones with one side off when cooking, just in case I called his name. Now, no one calls me anymore. One evening, while I was wiping tables during my shift, a regular customer, Mr. Daniel, called me over. He was in his 60s, always sat at the corner table by the window, always ordered corn soup and toast. He said, "I've noticed how you work. Quick, observant, and especially creative when dealing with customers." I smiled, a bit awkwardly. "Thank you, sir. I just try my best." He handed me a business card. "I run a startup in artificial intelligence. We're looking for someone to help with marketing, and I think you've got potential. If you ever want to try something new, give me a call." I took the card, reading the line, "Daniel W. Carter, CEO. Sentient AI," my hand trembling. I thanked him, and 2 days later, I sent an email to that address. A week later, I started my internship at the company, earning double the salary of my restaurant job. I thought, maybe this was life's way of comforting me after everything I'd lost. But then, just a week into the job, my body started reacting strangely. Foods I used to love, like Vietnamese banh mi or crispy fried chicken, suddenly made me nauseous. I couldn't eat anything in the mornings. Even the smell of oil made me turn away. I assumed it was from overwork or stress over Julian. I didn't consider anything else, until one day, my boss, Lillian, a woman in her 40s with soft curls and a tidy manner, pulled up a chair next to me after a meeting. She looked at me, eyes serious but gentle. "You're not feeling well, are you?" I hesitated. Maybe I stayed up too late recently. But Lillian didn't let me finish. She tilted her head, smiled softly, as if she had seen through something. "I have 3 kids, Amelia, and I'd say you're about 3 months pregnant." That sentence fell onto my desk like a bomb. I was stunned, not because I had never thought about it, but because I had never dared to. I left the office with my mind spinning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the small sofa in my shared apartment, one hand resting on my stomach. There were no obvious signs yet, but I could feel it more clearly than ever before. A life was growing inside me. The next morning, on Lillian's advice, I booked an appointment at a private gynecology clinic not far from the office. The doctor was an Asian woman around 50, named Lucy Nguyen, her voice light and warm, like early morning mist. When I lay down for the ultrasound, my heart was racing, my mind still trying to deny everything. Then the screen lit up, a blurry but unmistakably moving speck appeared. Lucy smiled. "The baby's developing well, about 12 weeks, steady heartbeat. Congratulations, I didn't know what emotion surged first. Joy, shock, or a numbing fear?" I nodded slightly, said nothing. Lucy didn't ask much. She only said gently, "Being a mother can be the scariest, and also the strongest thing a woman can ever do." I left the clinic with the ultrasound sheet tucked carefully in my bag. On the way back, I stopped by a bakery and ordered the grilled cheese sandwich Julian had made for me the first time we met. I stared at it for a long time, then put it away without eating. That night, I sat in front of the phone for almost an hour, hesitating over the familiar number. My parents' home. Finally, I pressed call. My mother answered. Her voice was, as always, polite, gentle, but distant. "Hello, dear. How have you been?" I didn't go around in circles. "Mom, I have something to tell you. I'm pregnant." Silence on the other end. I heard a sigh. Then her voice turned colder, firmer. "With him? Julian?" I nodded as if she could see me. "Yes, I know it's complicated, but I wanted you to know first. And I want you to be with me." Her voice hardened. "You know your father will never accept this. You've brought shame to us. There are many ways to fix this, but if you choose to keep that baby, then be prepared to leave this house." I gripped the phone tightly. "Mom, I can't have an abortion. This is a part of me. Julian's child. All that's left of him." This time she didn't reply. She just hung up. 10 minutes later, my father called back. No greetings, no hesitation. "Amelia, you have 2 choices. 1, terminate it. 2, leave this family and never come back." I said nothing. I've said it before. The Jenkins family does not accept this stain. I closed my eyes. Then I choose to leave. I still held on to hope, fragile as it was, that my mother would call back, that she would tell me not to take father's words too seriously, that things would be okay. But the phone never rang. No messages. Nothing. 3 days later, I returned home, the house I'd grown up in, to pack my things. I knocked. My father opened the door. He didn't say a word, just stepped aside, his eyes cold like I was a stranger. As I folded my clothes into a suitcase, Gabriel appeared at the bedroom door. "You're really doing this?" he said, his voice not loud but heavy. "You've made our whole family a joke. You made Dad so angry he can't sleep. What do you think this is? A gesture of love?" I turned to look at him, not in anger, just exhaustion. "I don't need you to understand. I just need you to respect my choice." Gabriel shook his head. "Julian got deported. He didn't even stay to take responsibility. Why are you keeping this baby? To prove you're noble? Or to prove our parents wrong?" I didn't reply. I knew any words at that moment would be useless. My mother stood in the hallway. I looked at her one last time, waiting for some gesture, just a nod, a softening in her eyes. But she stood still, clutching her rosary, saying nothing. I wheeled my suitcase through the hallway, past the family photo on the wall, the one where I stood at the edge, slightly obscured behind Gabriel's shoulder. I paused, just long enough to take one deep breath, then opened the door and stepped outside. As I walked through the gate, my father called out behind me, "From now on, whatever you bring upon yourself, you face alone. This family is no longer involved." I left home in the chill of an early October evening. I had nowhere to go, no one to call. The next morning, I went to the school office to ask about financial aid, but the finance officer simply said, "If you don't have a guarantor or family support, you'll need to withdraw or shift to deferred tuition with high interest and no guarantee of graduating on time." I stared at the withdrawal form, pen in hand, heart heavy. I had tried so hard, 3 years of scholarships, nightly work shifts, maintaining top grades, all of it unraveling now because of a child not yet born. That night, I slept in my car. Not because I wanted to, but because I had no other option. I parked behind a 24-hour convenience store, used my coat to cover my belly, both for warmth and comfort. I began a new routine, mornings working at the AI company, the internship still my only hope. Evenings, I took an extra shift at a small diner called Sunshine Diner. Late at night, I worked in the convenience store's stockroom, stacking shelves, labeling, mopping floors. Each day, I slept about 3 hours, ate whatever was cheapest, and spoke to the baby in my belly as if it were the only one left listening. "We'll be okay," I whispered. "I promise." But truly, those words, I said them more for myself than for the child. I started getting used to the rhythm of life split between 3 jobs. Every morning I changed clothes in the car, applied light makeup using the rearview mirror, then walked into the sentient AI office as if I were living a normal life. I learned to hide exhaustion beneath a layer of blush, to mask sorrow behind professionally worded emails. In the evenings, I worked at Sunshine Diner, a cozy little place on the corner with warm string lights hung year-round like it was always Christmas. I served quickly, without complaint, and spoke less than before. Everyone just assumed I was busy. No one knew the real reason. Until one night, Gianna, a coworker on the night shift, happened to pass by the parking lot behind the diner as I was quietly climbing into the back seat, arranging a mess of old blankets. I didn't notice her until I heard a soft voice. "Amelia?" I turned around, stunned. She looked at me. Not shocked, not intrusive, just a gentle gaze, enough to break me. "How long has it been?" she asked softly. I lowered my head. "About 3 weeks." Gianna said nothing more. She just shook her head, sighed, then said, "Get your stuff. My apartment has a spare sofa." I wanted to refuse, out of shame, pride, fear of being a burden. But when she took my hand and gently pulled, I knew I didn't have the strength to resist kindness anymore. That night, I slept on an old but clean sofa, in a small apartment scented with mint and soft cat meows from the kitchen. Gianna asked no further questions. She just left a thick blanket and a warm glass of water on the table, then turned off the lights. I lay on my side, hand on my belly, for the first time in weeks, not having to brace myself just to survive. I still believed, maybe, that my family would come around. That one day, my mother would knock on the door and say she missed me. But that never came. Not a message, not a call, not a single word, as if they'd never had a daughter named Amelia. And I learned to stop hoping for things that may never come. I had been living with Gianna for nearly 4 months when my pregnancy reached the 33rd week. The back pain came more frequently. I still worked at the AI company during the day and tried to limit my evening shifts. But sometimes, I still needed the extra money. So I pushed myself to wait tables until nearly 11 p.m. Then one night, as I was carrying a tray of food to table 6, a sharp contraction twisted through my lower abdomen, forcing me to my knees. I clenched my teeth, struggling to stay upright, sweat pouring down like I had just run a marathon. Ellen, a regular elderly customer who often sat journaling at the diner, rushed over and caught me. She told her husband Thomas to call an ambulance. I don't clearly remember how long the ride was. I just remember the sirens in the night and the 2 bright overhead lights in the ER that made me close my eyes. Ethan Julian Jenkins was born 5 weeks early, premature, tiny enough to fit in the palm of my hand. When the doctor brought him close, I burst into tears, not from fear, but because I couldn't believe that in all the things I had lost, there was still one small life that chose to stay. Ethan had to stay in an incubator for several days under observation. I stayed at the hospital, sleeping on a folding chair by the window. Ellen and Thomas took turns visiting, bringing food, talking with me, asking the doctors questions as if they were real family. They didn't ask who Julian was. They didn't judge me for having a child alone. They were simply there, exactly when I needed them most. When Ethan started feeding on his own, the doctors allowed us to go home. Ellen said, "You should come stay with us for a few days, at least until you find something stable." But I declined. I didn't want to impose on them long term. Gianna also messaged, asking me to bring the baby back, so I returned to Gianna's room with Ethan as soon as he was discharged. With no family, no daytime support, I juggled caring for my child while trying to maintain my remote work at the AI company to keep my internship. Diaper money, formula costs, postnatal checkups, it all came like an unannounced wave. I sent an email to my mother with a photo of Ethan sleeping and a short message. "Mom, I gave birth. His name is Ethan Julian. I'm doing okay. I hope you are too." I waited 3 days. No reply. I thought maybe she was busy. A week. Still silence. Then I realized they weren't planning to answer. I held Ethan in my arms and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's still here." I waited a few more months, waiting for some sign from my mother, my father, or Gabriel. But nothing came, and there was no reason left to wait. On a Saturday morning in early March, when Ethan was almost 6 months old and could roll over, I brought him back to the old house, the house where I grew up, the place I once believed was safe. I wore a beige, long dress, hair tied up neatly, and wrapped Ethan in a pale blue shawl that Ellen had knitted for him. On the way there, I imagined all sorts of outcomes. Mom might cry, Dad might be silent for a moment before turning away. Gabriel might hesitate at the door. But when I knocked, the one who opened the door was my father. He looked at me, then at the baby in my arms. There was no anger in his eyes, but no softness either, only emptiness, as if he was looking at someone he once knew but no longer mattered. I said softly, "I just wanted to introduce Ethan, my son." He shook his head and stepped back into the house without another word. My mother stood in the hallway. She didn't come out, didn't smile, didn't ask about her grandchild. She just stood still like a statue, clutching her Bible. Gabriel walked past, carrying a golf bag, and when he saw me, he said, "You shouldn't have come here." I tried to stay calm. "He's your nephew." He turned away. "You made your choice. The door closed behind me. No one touched Ethan. No one welcomed us. No one embraced us. I walked away. I didn't cry, but I didn't feel anything anymore. 3 days later, Gianna told me the landlord had found out I had been staying there unofficially, and if I didn't move out within 2 weeks, she would be evicted too. I didn't blame Gianna. She had done more than anyone else. I just asked for a few more days to figure something out. That night, Ethan was fussy. I held him and felt his body burning. I took his temperature, nearly 102 degrees Fahrenheit. I panicked, hurriedly dressed him, rushed to the car, and planned to drive to the nearest clinic. But just as I pulled out of the lot, the car died in the middle of the road. Warning lights flashed. The engine wouldn't start. I collapsed over the steering wheel. Ethan cried louder. I didn't know what to do. In the cold night air of March, on an empty street, I felt myself truly break. For the first time since Julian was deported, I wanted to scream, but my mouth wouldn't open. I wanted to ask for help, but who would hear me? Then, suddenly, a car slowly pulled up behind mine. The door opened. An older woman stepped out, silver hair tied back, a wool scarf around her neck. Amelia? I turned around, stunned. It was Mrs. Eleanor, my old 9th-grade art teacher. I once painted a portrait of my mother in her class, and she had kept it, saying it was one of the rare images that captured inner life with simplicity. She looked at me, asked nothing else. She just said, "Get in. I'll take you to the hospital." Ethan was diagnosed with an ear infection, a common illness in infants, but one that could affect hearing if left untreated. The doctor said I had brought him in just in time, a few hours later, and he might have had a seizure from the fever. Or worse. As I sat in the hospital hallway, cradling Ethan as he slept in my arms, Mrs. Eleanor sat quietly beside me. "I don't even know how to thank you enough," I whispered. She just placed her hand on my shoulder, warm and steady. "No need for thanks. You're my student. And now, a mother to a child who needs care. That's reason enough." The next day, when Ethan's fever had subsided and we were discharged, she didn't take me back to the old apartment. She drove straight to her small Spanish-style house in East Mission Valley, where she had lived alone since her husband passed away. The front yard had a white fence, a lemon tree brushing the window, and soft pink bougainvillea cascading from the porch. She led me down to the basement. The room had been renovated into a private space, complete with a small window, mini kitchen, private bathroom, and a clean double bed. "If you don't mind living next to an old lady who talks to herself and a cat named Salvador, you're welcome here as long as you like," she said, as if letting a stranger move in was an everyday event. I smiled, but tears fell instead. I stayed. Every morning, Mrs. Eleanor taught part-time at the nearby community art center. I worked remotely for Sentient AI, sending reports, processing data, and running small campaigns. Instead of staying up all night restocking shelves or waiting tables, I could sleep a full 6 hours. She cared for Ethan during my Zoom meetings. She read to him in Spanish, the language Julian once said he would teach our child when he was old enough. At night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, I sat at a small desk and enrolled in online courses about artificial intelligence, free classes from MIT, Stanford, Coursera. I wanted to better understand the work I was doing. I wanted to become good enough to never fear losing my job again. My life was still simple, but it was no longer about survival. It was the beginning of rebuilding, from the ground up. I never thought I would grow to love that basement, that place with the low ceiling and a window just big enough to let in a few hours of sunlight each day, where the sound of Salvador the cat tapping his claws on the wooden floor each morning felt like an alarm clock. But it became the first place I felt truly safe since being cast out of my home. No one yelled at me, no one judged me, no one told me I had to make things right. There was only Ethan's giggle every time Mrs. Eleanor blew soap bubbles, and the soft clicking of keys as I worked late into the night. I devoted my evenings entirely to studying. Every lecture on data processing, user behavior analysis, AI programming. I studied carefully, took notes, and applied them directly to my ongoing projects. With each report I submitted, I tried to offer a new idea, a deeper insight, not for praise, but because I knew I could never afford to go back to square one. After a year, those efforts began to get noticed. Lillian, my former boss, now the VP of Marketing, sent me an email requesting a one-on-one meeting. During the meeting, she said, "Emilia, I know your situation's been difficult. But what I admire most is that, even so, you never asked for special treatment. You never complained. You just quietly kept getting better. And you made others around you rise to your level." I was officially promoted from intern to marketing executive with a salary 3 times what I started on. For the first time, I had a real savings account. I bought a new laptop. I could afford better formula for Ethan and toys for him without waiting for sales. Mrs. Eleanor remained by my side as a grandmother, a friend, a steady back to lean on whenever I was about to fall. She cared for Ethan while I was on business trips, rubbed his chest with oil when he had a mild fever, and carefully logged his developmental milestones in a blue notebook. "Ethan took his first steps today," she wrote in her neat handwriting, showing me when I came home. "He walked slowly, arms outstretched, as if reaching for someone he could trust. I held him and smiled, but my eyes burned. I still hadn't forgiven my parents, but I knew now. There are bonds that don't require blood. Some families are chosen, not born." When I received the appointment letter naming me head of marketing 3 years later, I didn't cry. I just sat quietly, placed my hand on the desk, and looked toward the window, where sunlight poured over the little plants I'd grown, a pot of lavender, a rosemary bush, and a lopsided succulent that had somehow survived all these years. Just like me. Under my leadership, our customer conversion campaigns helped the company grow 50% in a year. We expanded into community AI education, and for the first time, I was invited to speak before more than 300 people at a major conference in Los Angeles. I stood on stage, microphone in hand, and looked down at the audience, where Mrs. Eleanor sat beside Ethan. He was 4.5 then, quietly drawing with colored pencils while I presented. I earned $180,000 a year, more than anyone in my family had ever imagined. And later that year, I bought my first house. A small, 2-bedroom home with a backyard big enough for vegetables and a front porch just wide enough for a wooden chair. On moving day, I let Ethan walk through the door first. "You're the homeowner now," I said, and he burst out laughing. "Really? Then can I pick the paint color?" I nodded. He chose light blue, the same shade Julian once used to paint our old apartment's bedroom. I chose a quiet riverside neighborhood, not far from the city center, but peaceful enough to hear birds in the morning. I worked remotely 3 days a week. On the others, Mrs. Eleanor would visit, bringing cornbread or helping pick Ethan up from preschool. He grew quickly and started drawing everywhere, on paper, on whiteboards, even on old pizza boxes. One day, I found him in the living room, drawing with crayons on an A3 sheet. When I got closer, I froze. It was an image of a woman standing on a wooden stage, holding a microphone, with an audience seated below, and a child sketching in the front row. "That's you," Ethan said, "and that's me, drawing you." I hugged him, not because the drawing was good, but because it told me one thing. My son saw me, truly saw me, not just as a single mom, not as someone who had once been abandoned, but as a role model, strong, complete, and living a life that mattered. When Ethan was 11, he entered a national art contest called Celebrating Art, an opportunity I hesitated over for a long time before submitting his work. I had worried. Would a child who once had no bed to sleep in, who followed his mother through 3 different states, who once drew with crayons on cardboard boxes, really be recognized among thousands of children born into stability? But when the results were announced, I cried. The painting titled, "The Lantern Keeper in the Mist," drawn by Ethan, not only won the top prize, but was chosen as the official cover image for Celebrating Art's website. In it was a woman holding a lantern, standing beside a mist-covered trail, with the shadow of a child behind her. No faces, no bright colors, just shades of gray, soft blues, and pale yellow. But I understood every stroke. I saw myself, in an abstract form, silent, solitary, but unwavering. The painting caught the attention of collectors and was listed in a charity auction. We didn't expect much, only hoped someone would appreciate it. But the results stunned me. $550,000. When the organizers called me to confirm, I was speechless. Ethan was right beside me when I hung up. I didn't know what to say, but he was the one who broke the silence. "I want to use this money to help kids who don't have art supplies, like I didn't," he said. "Can you help me start a fund?" I nodded, tears falling. We created the Ethan Art Fund, a scholarship program for underprivileged children with a passion for visual arts. I added another $200,000 from my own savings, and Mrs. Eleanor was the first to sign the community appeal letter. At the launch event, I stood beside Ethan as he gave his speech. I don't know much about my dad, but I know my mom went through a lot just to keep me, and if she didn't give up on me, then I don't want to give up on other kids either. In that moment, I knew one thing for certain. My son wasn't just born out of love. He was living to carry it forward in a way more powerful and compassionate than I had ever dared to dream. When the article about the Ethan Art Fund was published in the San Diego Tribune's education section, I only saw it as a small milestone in my son's journey, a way for him to understand that his effort mattered, that even a single painting could ease someone's pain out there. I didn't expect that it would bring the past back to my door. 1 week after the article came out, I received an email from Gabriel Jenkins, my brother. The first line read, "I read about Ethan. He's a remarkable kid." I lingered over that sentence for a long time. The rest of the email said our parents wanted to meet Ethan, that they had rethought many things, that our father was now old, no longer as strong as he once was, and that they were ready to listen, if I gave them the chance. I read the email over and over in silence, not angry, but not easily convinced either. It took me a week to reply, and during that time, I told Ethan nothing. I needed to be sure I could manage the situation, at least my own emotions. I wrote back, briefly and clearly. The family may meet Ethan, but under one condition. Everything must begin with the truth. No excuses, no denial of the past, and no more hurt. The meeting was scheduled for a Sunday afternoon, at the very house I had bought, decorated and built from scratch. I prepared Ethan carefully. I didn't tell him everything, just said, "Some people are coming to visit. They're your grandparents and Uncle Gabriel. But the most important thing is, I'll be right here with you, no matter what." When the car pulled up outside, I looked through the window. My father was now in a wheelchair, the hands that once clutched a Bible now trembling on the armrests. My mother stood behind him, her hair grayer than I remembered, and Gabriel, still well-dressed, shirt buttoned to the collar, but his eyes no longer as steady. The visit began in silence. Ethan whispered, "Can I push Grandpa's chair and show him the house?" I nodded. The boy gently pushed his grandfather through the small garden. My father, though he said nothing, held Ethan's hand for a moment. My mother watched, her eyes wet. I stood at the door, unmoving. I needed them to come forward, on their own, for the first time in my life. After Ethan walked my father around the garden, I invited everyone into the living room. I had arranged seats for 4 people, a reclining chair for my father, the long sofa for my mother and Gabriel, and I chose the single armchair by the window where I usually worked late at night. No one spoke for the first few minutes. Only the sound of wind brushing against the porch, tapping gently against the lavender pot hanging under the eaves. Finally, my father was the first to speak. His voice was weak now, no longer firm like when I was a child. "I don't know where to begin. Perhaps with an apology." I looked him straight in the eye. "You don't need to begin with an apology. I didn't come here to be forgiven. I came to speak. And for you all to listen. Truly listen. For the first time." No one objected. So I spoke, without embellishment, without omission. I told them about the phone call with Julian on that fateful day, about how I rushed to the restaurant and was told he'd been deported that same night, about the unanswered calls, about discovering I was pregnant, alone, about my father's ultimatum, abort or leave, about my mother's silence, about Gabriel, my twin brother, who turned his back when I needed him most. I told them about the nights I slept in a car, working 3 jobs to support my child. About the times Ethan had a fever and I was too afraid to take him to the hospital because I had no insurance. I told them how Mrs. Eleanor saved us both, and how I once wished she were my actual family. I didn't cry. I was past that. When I finished, the room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock. My father looked down at his hands. Those same hands that once held me steady when I was learning to walk, now veiny and frail. He spoke softly. I didn't listen. I put my reputation above my daughter, and I was wrong. My mother placed her hands on her lap, her voice trembling. "I knew, Amelia. I knew you were strong, but I did nothing, and that's haunted me for 5 years." I turned to Gabriel. He didn't look at me, just at a picture frame on the shelf where I'd placed Ethan's first drawing. "I was afraid to choose between you and our parents," Gabriel said. "So I chose the easy way, siding with the stronger ones. But now, I see that made me the weakest." I nodded. I did not forgive them, but I acknowledged, for the first time, they were truly listening. After everything had been said, I stood and walked over to the window, looking out at the backyard. The lavender bushes were in their second bloom. Ethan once called it the soft purple garden, his favorite place to sit and draw on quiet afternoons. I turned back, my voice no longer trembling but clear and resolute. "I don't need more regret," I said. "What I need are boundaries." All 3 of them looked up. No one objected. No one rushed to justify. Ethan is a kind, sensitive, and deeply compassionate child. But he is also a child who once lived in a car, who was hospitalized with no one to visit him, who asked, "Where are my grandparents?" and then learned to accept their absence. So if this family wants to be part of his life, you must truly be present, through actions, time, and consistent presence. I looked directly at my father. "If you cross this threshold again, you don't get to walk away and disappear. If you claim to be Ethan's grandfather, you must act like one, not like an elder who only knows how to judge." I turned to my mother. "If you want to be his grandmother, then be there. Not just with gifts or birthday calls, but through effort, through asking, through the willingness to truly listen." Finally, I looked at Gabriel, the person who once shared my birthday, our 3rd-grade party, a birthday cake with 2 names. But for over a decade, I had been alone. And you, if you want a relationship again, the first thing you need to do is apologize to Ethan, not because you hurt him directly, but because in the years he needed an uncle, you were nowhere. I sat down, quietly. No one argued, no one grew defensive. My father nodded slowly. My mother clutched the edge of her blouse, her lips trembling. Gabriel bowed his head. For the first time in years, I felt they were truly listening. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. The meeting ended with a simple dinner, Ethan's favorite, creamy spaghetti. I cooked. They helped set the table. The three of them sat together in my small dining room, for the first time in over a decade, not a family in the old sense, but a family relearning how to exist side by side, slowly, conditionally, and grounded in mutual respect. 2 months later, an email from my mother landed in my inbox. This year, if you're willing, I'd like to invite Amelia and Ethan home for Christmas. Not for show, not for the neighbors, but because I miss my grandson, and I miss you. I read that line and sat in silence for a long time. I thought of Ethan's eyes every time he saw other children with grandparents at school festivals. Not envy, but something distant, like he only knew family through stories others told. I didn't reply right away. I was no longer the child begging to be accepted. I was a mother, and my decisions now were about protecting the child I love. Forgiveness, to me, is not forgetting. Forgiveness is when you are strong enough to face the past and say, I'm okay. But from now on, I set the terms. I'm not sure what made me say yes. Perhaps the look in Ethan's eyes when he overheard the invitation. Perhaps part of me still wanted to believe that family wasn't entirely lost. Whatever the reason, I agreed. 2 days before Christmas, Ethan and I returned to my parents' house, the same house I had once been told to leave if I wouldn't make things right. The iron gate was the same, its white paint peeling in places. But something was different. The lemon tree in front had been neatly trimmed, and a new wreath with a red ribbon hung on the front door. My father sat in a wheelchair on the porch. My mother stood beside him. Gabriel was tying a scarf around Dad's neck, a sight I never imagined I'd see. Ethan, in his red velvet coat, carrying a gift box, climbed out of the car and ran up the steps. "Hi, Grandpa! Hi, Grandma!" His voice rang out, natural and bright. My father froze for a second. My mother bent down and gently hugged him, the first embrace after so many years apart. Then Ethan turned to me and whispered, "Mom, can I push Grandpa's chair inside?" I nodded. That small act seemed to melt the heaviness that had lingered all morning. Ethan wheeled my father into the living room, asking what colors he liked, whether he preferred cookies or chocolate. My father, usually quiet, chuckled softly as Ethan told him about winning an art contest and the scholarship fund named after him. Gabriel laid out a domino set, the same game he and I used to play for hours every Christmas. Ethan eagerly learned the rules from his uncle. My mother went into the kitchen to make apple pie, the same one she once won awards for at the county fair. I watched it all from the corner of the room, holding a mug of hot cocoa, not stepping in. I didn't need to be the center of this gathering. I only needed to ensure Ethan was safe and loved in the right way. That evening, as we all sat by the fireplace, my father held Ethan's hand and said, "I'm sorry I wasn't there during your early years." Ethan smiled and squeezed his hand. "It's okay, Grandpa. You're here now." I turned away, not to hide tears, but to commit that moment to memory. Not everyone gets a chance to start over, but some children, like Ethan, aren't born to continue the damage. They are born to open new doors, where no one has to be perfect, but everyone can choose to be kinder. Have you ever been abandoned for loving the wrong person? Have you ever had to carry a new life inside you, with no one beside you, just silence, shame, and a suitcase? If you've ever been told you don't belong, even by your own blood, share your story in the comments below, because someone out there might need your strength to believe they can survive too. And if this journey reminded you of something you've lived through, of a loss, a fight, or a quiet kind of bravery, please like and subscribe. Together, we honor stories of resilience, chosen family, and what it means to reclaim your voice when the world turns away. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply not give up. Thank you for listening.